do a little recap before we get to the first exercise. Lately, we've been talking about grouped data, and grouped data basically is generally given in a table. And when we move from that table, we'll have our intervals, and then we have columns like frequency. And then the previous lesson, we started talking about the column of cumulative frequency. And using a group data table like this, we could draw an ogive. And what an ogive is it's a graph which has the intervals on the horizontal, and it has the cumulative frequency on the vertical axis. And generally the shape looks something like this. It's a curved line, and it will get up to the total number of items in the data set. So that's just a quick little recap, but we're going to start by doing a cumulative frequency question. So here's what we're going to do. I'm giving you this table, and the story is as follows. The following grouped frequency distribution shows the marks obtained by 220 learners in a science examination. So you can imagine a whole grade takes a science exam, and there's 220 learners in the scientific examination. Now, in this, they've given us a frequency table that's laid out horizontally. And what they've said is that there are 2 students who got between 1 and 10%. There are 6 students who got between 11 and 20, and so on. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to fill out these 2 columns, okay, over here. So I want you to do that there. And then I also want you to add another column for the point that you are going to put on basically your ogive, which we're going to draw over here. So first of all, I want you to fill out the table. And then once you've done the table, I want you to put table done in the chat. So this is step 1. I want you to fill out these. And there's one important thing that when we plot the point, we have to remember. But I'm going to ask someone to please reply in the chat as to what that important idea we have to remember when we are figuring out this point. Okay, but over to you guys. You can let me know with table done when you've done the table. I'll give you that little tip just to get you going. Now, if there is a student who has a question about drawing a ogive or drawing the table, now would be a great time to raise your hand, and I will do my best to, we can have a conversation about something. Otherwise, put it in the chat. But let's get this table done. Make sure I have my calculator with me too. Help me out as we go. Hi, Asanda. So let me just make sure 80 plus 59 is 139. Yep. Now what am I hoping this adds up to? Okay, so Emihle, can I ask you, what was the very important, I've done the cumulative frequency column myself, but now I need to come to plotting the point, or basically having the point that's going to go onto my ogive. I want to know, how do I generate this point? Could you maybe tell me, Emihle, in the chat, or if you raise your hand, how do we go about getting this point that is going to go onto our cumulative frequency curve? Or anybody else know? What's the one really important thing we have to remember as we try to make these points? Owami, let's go to you. Hi, Owami, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Awesome. Owami, what was the important point that you had to take into account?
To get the point, you have to use for the marks 1 to 10. You have to use that 10 and the cumulative frequency, sir.
Perfect. So you use the end of the interval, which is 10, and you use the cumulative frequency. And so your very first point, was your first point, Owami, 10, 2? Was
yes,
that your?
God.
Perfect. Okay. So everyone, what I want you to do is, I'm actually going to use this block here. So that the very first point would be 10, 2, and the second one would be 20. So that's the end of the next interval, and 8. Once you have got all those points, I want you to start putting them onto an ogive. Now, just to show you where this first point would be, I'm going to use a different color. So 10, 2 would just be in line with 10 on the marks and 2. So it's going to be down here. And then 28 would be over here. So for everyone now, even if you haven't finished the table yet, you can take some time to finish your table. And then I want you to plot for me the points of the ogive. Now, there's one other extra thing. We've got the way the points work. There's one other thing about the beginning of an ogive that I spoke about in the last lesson. Can anybody else remember what it was? It's like a little bit extra. What do we have to? So whenever we have our first point in our ogive, we always add an extra point that gets us back down to 0. And this will be at the beginning of the first interval. So it ends at 1 to 10. We're going to just add an extra point over here at the beginning of the first interval that gets us back to 0. Okay, so what you're doing now is you're finishing the points and you're plotting your ogive. And once you've done, there we go. Komotsile said it, it begins at 0. Perfect. When you are done drawing your ogive, just put ogive done in the chat, and then I know you're done. I'm going to finish my table and then go through the plotting as we go. 30, 19. It's 40, not 22, 40, 41. Let me zoom in a bit. The other thing that I'm realizing is it's easier to just do this like this. To 20. Okay, so we've done those two. 30. So I haven't plotted my whole ogive yet, but you can see the pattern that I'm using. I'm ticking off my points, and I've plotted 4 points, and then I have my bonus point at the beginning. Are there any questions, guys, as we get going with this? I know most of you are working, which is perfect, but if you do have a question, now is a great time to ask in the chat or raising your hand. So you can really see how the numbers jump up. Like the ogive really jumps up when you get to like 50 to 60 and 60 to 70. 70, 184. I mean, it really jumps. 70, 184. We're around about there. 80 is 204. So about there. 90 is about 215. And then 100. Now, we're not all done yet, so I'm going to give a bit more time, but I'd love to know from the people who have drawn their ogive, what type of lines do we use to draw our ogive? What type of lines do we use to draw our ogive? Okay, so be careful. It's an S shape. So Wami, it's not straight lines, it's curved lines. It gives an S shape, you're right, a rough S shape. But when we draw it, when we connect these points up, we're actually going, oh, I missed the 1 point there a little bit. Because I'm digital land, I'll give myself a little bit of leeway. Okay, so that is what your ogive should look like. Now, what this is doing is it's summarizing the story of the data. And what we notice is that at the very, very top line, we're in line with 220. And that makes sense because there are 220 students who took the science exam. And you can see the ogive gets steepest kind of between 40 and 70. Like that's where a lot of the students are sitting. Okay. Now, here's the next stage. Actually, let me just wait a bit. Who would like more time to finish their ogive? So just type, or if you're not, yeah, let me know in the chat if you need more time for your graph. The next part of the lesson is to work with, okay, we've got this data set. How do we find things like the lower quartile, the upper quartile for this data set? So just let me know in the chat if you're ready to move on. That's what the ogive done part is mainly for. Okay, so next part of the lesson. So drawing your ogive is one thing, but now what they ask you is, okay, there's this data set with 220 students, and they want to know, use the ogive. In fact, here is the question down here. We're just going to do question 1. Determine the lower quartile for this data set. Now, the lower quartile, if you have a list of data, is quite easy to count to, but when you have grouped data, you have to use, you can use an ogive to estimate what it is. So we're going to try and find Q1. I want to know from the previous lesson, what is the first step that I need to do? Or I'd love to hear someone's voice who can explain how are we going to use this graph that we've drawn, this ogive, to find Q1. Who would like to share? Just pop your hand up, or you can put it in the chat. What's the very first step that we need to do to find Q1? Okay, Zincle has said we need to find the position of Q1. And she has given us the formula, a quarter times n plus 1. And so the n value is the number of students involved in this question. So it's a quarter times 220 plus 1. So I want to know, what is the position of the lower quartile? Let me know in the chat. What's the position of the lower quartile? And then we still need to go and find the lower quartile from the graph. We've just done a little temporary calculation. Okay, so Kumotsire, 55.25 is what I'm seeing there. And I agree with you. Now, because this is an approximation, we're not going to get perfect accuracy. But basically, what I'm looking for is 55.25 position is going to be on the vertical axis. So I count, and let me get a different color for. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 55 would be about here. So that's the position of Q1. It's not the value, it's just the position. And so I draw a horizontal line across. Sorry, guys, it's not a perfect horizontal line, but I get to there. And then in order to work out my Q1, I want you guys to work it out. So what is your Q1 value going to be? So that was my position. I want you guys to put in the chat, what is the value of Q1 for this particular story? So to get Q1, I go straight down here. For me, Q1 looks around 45 or 46. So it's not going to be perfect. I see a lot of you have gone with 45. Yeah, 45 or 46. Let's go with 45 for convenience. So we know that the lower quartile is 45. Now, what does that actually mean, guys? It means that 25% of the students got below 45% for the exam, and 75% of the students got more than 45. Remember, Q1 divides the data up. So you have found an estimate for Q1 using your ogive. Now, what I want now is I want you to work by yourself to find an estimate for Q2, the median, and Q3 using the same drawing. So off you go. And if there are any questions, please do raise your hand. But you're going to use a very similar method in order to calculate this. So over to you guys. Let's see what you can get. And if there are any questions, you can just raise your hand. Okay, so Michle, I think you're on the right track there. Yep, position of the median 110.5. That looks good to me. Does anybody agree with Michle about the position of the median? Awesome. Okay, so we know it's position 110.5. So what is Q2 going to be? What is the estimate of the median from the ogive going to be? Asanda agrees. Awesome. Okay, so we're using the same method. Now I want to know, what is the median going to be?
Mr. Ace?
Yes.
Katleho is asking, why do you use a quarter to calculate the first quartile?
So it's basically because it's the first quartile, it's a quarter of the way through the data. And so that's why we use a quarter. Whereas for Q2, the median, it's halfway through the data. So sometimes you see people use 2/4, but a half means the same as 2/4. So it's just the lower quartile will always have the formula quarter times n plus 1. The median, which is the second quartile, will be 2/4 times n plus 1. And then Q3 will always have the position formula 3/4 times n plus 1.
Thanks, Mr. Ace.
Pleasure. Okay, so what are we getting for my 110.5 position? It's about over here. And then to me, that looks, give or take, like it's going to be 55. And so my estimate, so for this one, that was 45. This is going to be 55. Now, what does that mean? It means half the students scored less than 55 and half the students scored more than 55. If I was interpreting, what that means in terms of marks. Let's try for Q3. Can you get an estimate for Q3 using the ogive? So Q2, 55. Nice, Asanda, nice. So what's going to be my estimate for Q3? So I agree with you. The position is 165.75. What is the actual estimated value of Q3? $165.75. Somewhere around there. Yeah, so 65 or 66. Obviously, the scale is not perfect, but 60, I'll go with 65 for that. And so that would be the upper quartile. Okay, now I want to take this a little bit further. I want you guys to give me, and I want you to work out what is the interquartile range of this data set using what you've worked out now. Now, in order to do that, you need to remember what is the interquartile range. Can anybody help us with that in the chat or by raising their hand? What is the interquartile range? How do we calculate that? I'd love to. Oh, I see someone's hand is up. Can we? Owami, yes. Owami, how do we calculate the interquartile range?
So the interquartile range is Q3 minus Q1. So
Perfect. So Q3 minus Q1. So what are you going to get for that, Owami?
let's see. So
here's Q3 and here's Q1.
20. So you're gonna get 20. So
Perfect. Yep. So the interquartile range is 20. That means that 50% of the students score between 45 and 65, in terms of interpreting the data. That is, guys, you're doing so well. You really are doing fantastically well. In fact, you're doing so well. I think I'm going to add one last extra question. So I want to know, what is an estimated value for P90? So if I said to you, determine the estimated value of P90, so I'll put here P90. And then I also want to know from you, what does P90 even mean? Can someone help me with knowing what is P90? There might be some students who've joined us later in this course. When I ask you for P90, what is P90? Nicely done, Faith. I see your interquartile range there. So P90 is the 90th percentile. It's 90% of the way through the data. And if I was going to work out P90, I first have to find the position of P90. Just like I did before. So P90 is 90% of the way through the data. And the position of P90 is going to just be 90 over 100 times n plus 1. So tell me in the chat, what is the position? And then once you've worked out the position of P90, you can try and give me a value for P90. So the position is 198.9. What is my estimated value of P90 using this ogive? Let's have a look. So just like the other ones, 198.9, it looks to me like it's all the way up here. So I'm going to get to about there. And it looks to me like P90 is 75. Now, what does that mean? Well, in the context of this set of things, it says that 90% of students score less than 75 and only 10% of students score above 75. Okay, guys, I'm so proud of you. You've done so well. Like, we really are getting into the more detailed part of ogives. And once you get this, all these sort of exam interpretation questions become a lot easier. Okay, but I think we need a break. So what I want is I want everyone to turn their cameras on, and I want you to stand up, and I want you to show me your best stretch. And Lebo, if you could please encourage our students to do their best. I'm going to do the same, and then we'll come back after our break recharged.
Please join in, guys. Give your mind a break.
Yes, we've been working hard.
You guys did so well. Shout out to Lesego. Anybody else who wants to show us their moves?
There we go. Michle, your hand is up. Let's go to you. Hi, Michle. What's your question?
Hi, sir. I wanted to ask if we ever use deciles besides using quartiles and percentiles. Do we ever use deciles?
So deciles are not very common, but they could be used. But basically, if I say to you, like the third decile is the same as the 50th percentile. So, I mean, you can basically convert them into sort of percentage language. So even if they give it to you in deciles, but it's really not that common, huh? If I'm honest, it's most percentiles and quartiles are the most common one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Has everybody had a good stretch, guys? Give me a thumbs up if you managed to have a bit of a stretch. Awesome. Okay, well then I know it's time for a brain break. So me and Lebo were talking about Star Wars before the lesson. We actually were, strangely enough. And then here is a Star Wars puzzle question.
Yes.
So, see if you can crack the puzzle. So this looks like a Sith or Darth Vader like headrest. Does anybody know what the Darth Vader headrest is going to be? Any ideas?
Zinhle says 14.
Zinhle, I agree with you, because 3 Darth Vaders give you 42, then that must be 14. Now, I think this is a Luke Skywalker hiding here. So it turns out Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader are also 14 each, because they're equal. Okay, so now what else do you need to figure out? Who knows the names of the robots? I think in the original movie it was R2 and D2. And then there's some. So the robots is 3. I think I agree with that. And then the flying spaceman person must be 9. So what is my final answer going to be? So 14 plus 3 plus 9. Fuzlin, Zinhle, and Michle, I all agree with you. It is 26. And so that is the answer to our little brain break. I hope that you enjoyed that. It was nice to have some sort of characters involved.
Good one, guys.
Awesome. Okay, let us return to the work of the ogives. So if we look, I'm going to skip this one. Let's do this one here. And what I'm going to do, actually, let's go here to this question down here. All right, let's do an interpretation question. So in the last one, we did a question where you had to draw the ogive. Now, sometimes in exams, they give you the ogive already drawn. And so I want to have a bit of a debate here. What is the story that's going on? So it says the ogive tells the story of a random sample of 50 boys in grade 11. So, and the masses are recorded. And this is the cumulative frequency graph that recorded their masses. So we know that the top line is going to be 50 because that's how many boys there are in the sample, or we can say n is 50 in another language. Now, it says over here how many of the boys had a mass between 90 and 100 kilograms. So what I want to suggest is, first of all, could we work out how many boys had a mass of, or I actually want to ask, open it for interpretation, like where would we start with this? If you guys were trying to answer this question, how many boys had a mass between 90 and 100? Part of me thinks we should just go and find 90 kilograms on the axis. I was thinking that. And so where is 90? It's over here. Now, what is it telling me when 90 over here is in line? It looks to me like it's in line with 26 over here. What does it mean if 90 is in line with 26? I see a bonga, great minds think alike. Indeed. If I connect the 90 as the mass and 26 as the cumulative frequency, who would like to tell me in words, or what does that actually mean? Because remember, we're trying to find how many have a mass between 90 and 100, but what I want to find out is, what does it mean if I go 90 on the horizontal to 26 on the vertical? Clueless. Position, I guess. Well, it does. So you know what it actually means? It means that there have been 26 students who weigh 90 or less. So if you go backwards, if you go from here, all of these students basically between 60 and 90, there are 26 students who weigh between 60 and 90. That's what it's saying. So give me a thumbs up if that kind of makes sense. Like when we say cumulative frequency, there's 26 students. In total, we have 50 students here. But what this graph is saying is it's saying, if I go from 90, at that point, I've already had 26 students who I've counted up in my cumulative frequency. Okay, so that's the one bit. Now, if I go to 100 and I go up, what do you think I'm in line with now? So if I go from 100 kilograms, what number, can you guys give me a bit of a guess there? I'll try and zoom in. What is the number 100 in line with on the vertical axis? So to me, I can't see it perfectly, but I think it's this 1, 2. So it's going to be going, that's going to be about 44. Okay, so what we've got so far is we know that 26 students weigh 90 kilograms or less. Because this is a cumulative frequency, it accumulates things. So we also know that 44 students weigh 100 kilograms or less. I want to know how many boys or how many students have a mass between 90 and 100. Does anybody have an idea about how we could work this out? Because I've given you two things. There's 26 students who weigh 90 or less. There's 44 students who weigh 100 or less. How many weigh, between 90 and 100? Who has an idea? I'd love to hear a human voice if you're feeling brave enough. Otherwise, I want to get a sense of how did you work it out? I see the answer coming through from some of you. Keep it coming. Hariva, I agree. So you go. Huh?
I'm sorry, Mr. Is. I was just saying there was a hand from Faith. A hand up.
Oh, Faith. Oh, please, Faith. I want to know why. Faith, how did you know? I haven't seen what you've written down, but what was your thinking with the 44 and the 26? How did you use them?
Oh, well, sir, I saw that. Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Also, sir, I thought, according to what you told us, you gave us 44 and 26. At first, I thought that it was 35 because it's the number that's between those 2 points. But after you gave us the points, I realized that we must take 44 and minus it by 26.
Yeah, exactly. And so what did you get as your final answer? 18?
Yes.
Perfect. So using this method, we get 18 students way between 90 and 100. And so sometimes we have to interpret what the ogive is doing. And that's why I jumped to this question. We'll come back to some more of these. But for the second question now, I want you to use this ogive to estimate the median or estimate what Q2 is. And I want you guys to do that all by yourself. So the first answer is 18. What is the median mass for this ogive going to be? So sort of different types of questions here. So I agree with Siyabonga. The position is going to be 25.5. The position, remember that position is in the cumulative frequency column. Where is the actual estimate of the median going to be? Remember, the topic or the data we're dealing with are people's masses. So I go to 25.5. 25.5. 35 is going to be about here. And to me, it looks to be about 88 or 89. I'm going to go with 88, but 88 or 89 is completely fine. So 88 kilograms. So what does that mean? I mean, these sound like they're very heavy boys, because what that means is that there are half of the students are less than 88 kilograms, or half of these boys, and half of the boys are more than 88. And 88 is pretty big. So I don't know where this was taken from. I don't know, but yeah. So the estimate would be, or Q2 would be 88 kilograms. Okay, last one. Estimate how many boys had a mass less than 80 kilograms. So how many boys had a mass less than 80 kilograms? I want to let you try this by yourself first before I give any additional input. So how many boys had a mass less than 80 kilograms? If you have a question, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to wait for some feedback. So if I'm looking for 80 kilograms, it feels like I'll find that on the horizontal axis. So I'm going to go find 80, and then I'm going to connect it up to my ogive. Okay, so that's 80. Now, what is 80 in line with? Seems to be in line with 15. So how many boys had a mass less than 80 kilograms? Well, an ogive, this is going to say that 15 boys had a mass, because we've only got up to 80. So we're only counting those who kind of are 80 or below. The answer is going to be 15, or approximately 15. So 15 students had a mass less than 80 kilograms. Now, are there any questions or comments, everyone? Because I'm going to try one more question before Emilia. Okay. So Emilia, where am I losing you? Do you want to come online and just, or the main thing with an ogive is when you know 80 kilograms, you follow it to 15 on the vertical axis. Now, what that means is you've only counted up 15 students up to the point of 80 kilograms. So because we've only had 15 students up to the point where we got to 80 kilograms, we can only have 15 students who weigh 80 kilograms or less. Whereas if we look at something like 90, with 90, if we follow the red line up and we get to 26, we know there are 26 students who weigh 90 or less. So that's what it's telling me. Now, to extend this idea, I could also ask you, how many students weigh between 80 and 90 kilograms using this ogive? So this is going to be the last question. We're going to call it for today. But if you had to estimate how many students weigh between 80 and 90 kilograms, that's my last question of the day for interpretation. So we know that 80, there are 15 students that weigh 80 or less. How many students weigh 90 kilograms or less? And then can we work out how many then weigh between 80 and 90? So we know that there are 26 students who weigh 90 or less, and we know there are 15 students who weigh 80 or less. So how many weigh between 80 and 90? It's going to be 11. And that 11 is just sitting over here. It's this part of the curve. There are 11 students that sit between those two. Okay. Everyone, you've done really, really well. And I hope that over the last two lessons, we've shown you, okay, the process for plotting an ogive, and then just the process for reading off questions, calculating Q1, Q2, and Q3, and so on. Okay, but I think you've done really, really well. Lebo, if you could please just share the link to the quiz for the students. And then, guys, next week, we are going to be finishing off data. We're going to do all exam questions. So we're going to bring all the different topics that we've done of the last 8 lessons together. And we'll just be kind of jumping around, making sure we can recall the stuff that we've been doing. And then the next topic after that is going to be probability. So that is where we're going. Are there any final questions from the class?
Sorry, Mr. S, I'm still getting the link for the quiz
Okay,
from
no, that's fine.
Slack here.
Or maybe just some feedback about today. Like, what was stuff that you can just let us know in the chat. What are some of the things that you still want to work on in data? Since we're getting down to these last 2 lessons on data, what areas are you still a bit bugged about in terms of things you find hard? Let me know in the chat, or just let me know how you found today. It's always nice to get a bit of feedback. What worked, what didn't. Okay, and I see Lebo has shared the link in the chat.
I'm
Thank
sorry, Mr. S, can they please use the second one? Please use the second one, guys.
Please use the second one, guys. And then Amukalani, what's your question?
Good afternoon, sir.
Hey.
I just wanted to know, so to find the mass or whatever, you have to go to the numbers that they're talking about on the vertical side of the graph, and then you have to look for like where the line is, like the number on the horizontal side, and then just take those numbers and you minus it from each other, and then it's okay.
So the horizontal is the intervals, and then on the vertical is the cumulative frequency, or basically what that means is it keeps track of how many students have been involved. So that's why when you say like 80, okay, so 80, when we've got to 80, that's like we're counting from the bottom, from the lightest student up to 80, and there's been 15 students involved so far. And so that's kind of what it means in terms of just straight like interpretation.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, sir.